Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. If you guys are new here, welcome. Today, we're going to do 5 looks using one palette and as you guys can see, we're definitely playing with a colorful palette and today we're going to talk about the Mikayla palette from Glamlite. Recently, Glamlite did go for like a 35% off site-wide for the spring sale, and that is when I picked out the Glamlite's Mikayla palette as well as the Chocolate Martini palette, which I use almost every day when I'm going for work. But this is like very unusual of me. If you guys don't know me, I am big of like a neutral bronzy kind of a person. I love my purples and pinks, but otherwise I'm very in my shell when it comes to these kind of colors. But you guys can see I did experiment. Out of the 5 looks, 2 of them are super colorful, totally outside my comfort zone. But talking about this palette, I think Mikayla did an absolutely amazing job with the mattes and the shimmers and the textures that are included in it. So first we're going to swatch this palette. I'll leave the price on the screen for you guys, like the retail price, or else you can use the code GLAM15, I think, for 15% off, which came in my box when I purchased this product. But let's first go into the swatches and then we'll start off with the 5 looks using this palette. So if you're ready, let's begin. Okay, let's start swatching the palette. The first row is Harley, how you doing? Gemini. So the theme behind the palette was that Mikayla wanted basically this palette to go from neutral to colorful. And if you guys don't know, I mean, she's a big TikTok person and she does such amazing look. I leave her TikTok account as well as her Instagram in the description box below for you guys to check her out. But she like absolutely smashes off with all the looks. So her vision for this palette was to go from neutrals and then go deep into colors. So if you ask me, I'm very comfortable with the first 3 rows. Like I love my neutrals, I love my peachy tones and pinky tones, and I love my pinkies and purples. But when it comes to greens and blue, I'm super scared of. From the bottom row, I would say I was pretty comfortable in using these purpley tones, but rest everything was like outside my comfort zone. But when I dipped into this palette with the shades that were already existing, I felt you can definitely go outside the comfort zone, but staying in your comfort zone too, if that makes sense. I don't know. This is the neutral row, as you can see, like pretty natural, especially for my tan skin tone. She goes from like super skin tone shade, like the blending shade, to up till like deep dark. This is like the deepest shade in the palette if you have to go with neutrals, and it does have like that purpley winey tone to it. I love it. Love these tones, especially for an everyday life. Like super. Okay, now let's move on to that peachy row, the second row in the palette. This is a beautiful duochrome glow up, and then a pinky coral Simba, and then more of like a golden bronze shade. I don't know, how will I fit everything? I'll try. And these shades, the shimmers, the matte, every super creamy. Those were the first 3 shades. Let's go line by line, otherwise we'll take a long time. Buffalo chicken, manifest, cookie. Like, look at those shades. So those are the first 2 rows swatched. Pretty neutral, I would say, and then dipping into the peaches and the corals and the purpley tones. So let's move on to the next row. Iconic, simping, immaculate. Beautiful. And I'll give you the close-up at the end of the video in the outside lighting too, how everything like swatches, how dimensional it is. So that is MJ, New Beige, and NARS. And I can like definitely say no 2 colors are the same here. Absolutely no 2 colors. Love that aspect about this palette. Otherwise, whenever it's like such a big palette, you can definitely see like repeated tones, but everything has a different undertone. Even if you go with like the first 2 shades, this is more of a blending shade for me. This is a little more of a deepening transitioning shade. when you see these two shades, this has a lot more pink and this is like a orange. These two shades on the eyes, it's totally different, like totally different. And when you go with these two purples, this is more of like a deeper, more satiny purple, and this has so much shimmer in it, like unreal. Okay, now let's move on to the greens. Even the greens that were chosen in this palette were like superb, I would say. So this is Best Color, Bonehead, and Stunning. Then we have Portuguese, Part 2, Rodi. Oh my god, her accent. Oh my god. If you've heard about her accent, you know it. I mean, if you've seen her, you know it. So that is the fourth row. And the last row, we have Audrey. Oh, such a beautiful shade. Oh my god. And then we have Freetown and Loop. Audrey, Freetown, and Loop. And we have Handy, Frisky. So, such a beautiful shade. And Mass Hole. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful. So those are the last two rows of the palette. You can see how beautifully everything swatches, how dimensional it is. Stunning it is. Now let me show you a close-up of all the shades in the outside lighting, in the sun lighting. How shimmery, how dimensional it is in the outside lighting, because this is totally stunning in different light situation. But again, just to give you a synopsis, this is the entire palette swatched. Totally my comfort zone, a little more stepping outside my comfort zone. And let's not even forget about the packaging. I mean, this is such a fun packaging. This is so Mikayla. Mikayla loves glitter. It's so fun. I love it. And the shades that she chose are absolutely spectacular. And it has a huge mirror too. So beautiful. Mikayla, if you're watching it, I doubt. But if you're watching it, you absolutely smashed it out of the park. So now, without further ado, let's dive into the 5 looks using this palette. Now I'm putting the shade MJ, which is like that purple, like a periwinkle purple, on my crease. And I'm just going to intensify it with the shade Iconic, which is pink, in the inner third of my crease. So basically blending that pink into that purple. And then just to intensify it a tiny little bit on the outer corners, I'm first going to take the shade called Frisky. Maybe I should take a little Part 2. Oh, that's such a beautiful shade. I'm going to put Frisky right here in the outer corners. And I'm also going to blend that on my lower lash line. I'm basically placing the shades rather than blending it. And then I'm going to take this shade which is called Part 2. And then blend the edges of the shade Frisky. Because it's a deeper purple, so it will blend really nicely with that periwinkle purple. But it's not as deep as Frisky. So that's a great blending shade in between. And I'm going to take the same shade Part 2 on my entire lower lash line. And we can come back to the shade Frisky, which we applied on the outer corners after we have applied our shimmer shades. That's really nice. I love the way it turned out. So now for the shimmer, okay, let's start off with the shade called Simping, which is that baby pink shade. And I'm going to apply it diagonally, starting from the inner corners. These are so sparkly, like so sparkly. I'm going to take it like a rough cut crease, I would say. Just like that. I'm just going to fade it in, keeping that diagonal shape. Now I'm going to take the shade which is called, what should we take? Should I take New Beige or Manifest? Let's take Manifest because that shade is like calling to me. And I'm going to take that on the center of my eyelid. And again, move into that diagonal shape, but covering like the center of my eyelid. I'm going to dip back into this shade which is Simping, the baby pink, and just blend those two shades together. Still keeping the baby pink on the outer corners and keeping the main lid as Manifest, just like that. Such a pretty shade. Oh my god, I'm loving the shade Manifest. Like, those are like my kind of shades. Whatever is left in my eyes, I'm gonna apply that on my lower lash line, like the center of my lower lash line. Just for a little sparkle and shine, I'm gonna dip back into the shade which is called Frisky from the palette, that deep purpley burgundy shade, and just intensifying my outer corners. Just like that. Now I'm just going to finish off my eyes with some liner and mascara and I'll get right back. I don't know when did it stop recording, but I applied Glow Up on my inner corners for the added pop-up. And that is it. And that's our first eye look, all complete. For the second eye look, I took this shade which is called Gemini from the palette and I blended it all across my crease. And for the inner and the outer corners, I took the shade Willow and Hot Cocoa mixed together and applied that in my inner and the outer corners of the eye. And that is when I think it stopped recording. And I'm going to apply the same mixed shade, Hot Cocoa and Willow together. And I'm going to apply that on my lower lash line. I want to keep it a lot neutral this time, but I want to make it a little smoky. So I'm going to take this shade which is called Cookie from the palette. This one. It's a pretty smoky shade. But before I apply that all over my eyelid, I'm just going to take a tiny little bit of my NYX glitter glue and I'm just going to plop it on the center of my eyelid just because it's a deep shade. I don't want it to fall all over my face. So I'm just going to very messily just tap it on the center of my eyelid and then plop the shade called Cookie right on top of it. It's a very deep dark brown with a charcoal glimmer running all throughout it. Just like that. Now, just to deepen up the tiny little bit, I'm going to take this shade Willow again by itself and I'm just going to apply that on my outer and the inner corner. First, just tap the product in and then blend it out a tiny little bit so that we can get that halo effect. And I'm going to blend that on my lower lash line too. Now for the pop in the inner corners, I want to dip into this shade which is called Stunning from the palette. It's a beautiful goldy green shade. And I'm going to plop that right in my inner corners. Just like that. You definitely don't have to do that. I just want to use all the shades in the palette. So that's why I'm going to do it. But you can keep it like pretty neutral and just pop one of the golden shades in the inner corners. Now just for the center pop, I'm going to take this shade which is called What's Popping. And just going to plop it right in the center of my eyelid. Just to give added brightness to the eye. Nothing much, just a tiny little bit. I'm also going to tight line my waterline with any black eye pencil. This basically is the e.l.f. Jen Atkin Zero Effort Liner. I don't think you can find this anymore, but I want to use this up. So I'm using this as my waterline eye pencil and I'm just going to take my Essence Volume Stylist Mascara and that's our second look. A little more on the neutral side. but just jazzed it up a tiny little bit with a pop in the inner corners. So I'm going to take the shade called Mass Hole and I'm going to put that on my outer corners of the eye. It's almost matching the dress that I'm wearing. It's a royal blue shade. Fun fact, this was like my engagement theme color. So I was like wearing this blue gown and my husband was wearing this kind of a blue tie. That's what it reminds me of. Like that. And then I'm going to take this shade which is called Rhody from the palette. And I'm just going to slightly blend the edges of this shade. Super colorful. I mean, I am not that colorful if you guys know me. But I'm gonna blend this towards the outer corners. Basically blending that deep blue shade which was Mass Hole. And I'm also gonna do that on my lower lash line. I'm gonna take this shade which is called Loop. And I'm gonna apply that on my inner third of the eye. And then blend it into that blue shade. Just so that we have that gradient from green to blue. And then dip back into that Mass Hole shade. And this just re-intensify the outer corners. Now I'm going to take this shade which is called Audrey from the palette. It's a beautiful blue shade. Very eye-catching and very deep, I would say. I'm going to plop that on the center of my eyelid. Look at that. It'll definitely pop a little more with the glitter glue. But that's okay. And then I'm going to take this shade which is called Accent from the palette. And I'm just going to plop that in the inner third of the eyelid. And then blending it out with that blue shade. I'm again going to re-intensify the Audrey shade. And then just blend it right in. Now I'm going to take this shade which is called Stunning from the palette. And I'm going to plop that in my inner corners. Just because we have that green in the crease, I think that would be really good. But I'm just going to re-intensify the green in the crease a tiny little bit. I'm going to take that Loop shade and then just go towards the edges. So that's my third eye look. I'm going to dip into this shade which is called Simba from the palette and just blend that in the crease. Wow, that's a beautiful shade. I'm also going to plop that on my lower lash line. Now I'm going to take this shade which is called Buffalo Chicken and I'm going to plop that also on my crease, but a little lower than the other shade which was Simba. I'm going to go with a gradient look here, basically like deep to light. And now I'm going to take this shade which is called Patu and I'm going to slightly start blending that basically all over my lid, I would say, just so that we have that shade all there. And then to pack all over the lid, I'm going to take this shade which is called Frisky. I'm basically going to pack that on my lid like that. A tiny little bit of fallout. I'm going to just brush it through. I'm going to go back to this shade which is with Simba and just slightly blend the edges just so that we have that gradient going on. And then finally I'm going to take this yellow which is called Handy and I'm just gonna put that towards the edges. So basically from a yellow to a orangey pink to a purple. And then for the inner corners, I'm going to take this shade which is called Simping, and I'm just going to plop that in the inner corners. Just like that. And that's my fourth look. Now going completely outside my comfort zone, I'm going to take this shade which is called The Best Color. Oh my god. If you know, you know. You know how much I dread my grains. Okay, I'm going to start that with my inner corners. I know guys, I know. I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, who is mowing the lawn early in the morning? I'm gonna take that in the inner corners just like that. Super bright, I know. Gonna do the same thing on the other eye. Basically gonna pat, not a lot of blending. We'll put a shimmer over it and that'll be gone. You know. Oh my god, I look hideous. That's okay. Okay. Let's trust the process and move forward. I'm going to take the shade called Frisky from the palette. I'm going to apply that. Start from the outer corners and try to meet with that green. I think I'll dip into the other green also, just so that it's not super neon like this. And the place where it meets, it's forming a little bit of purple, if you can see, which is my happy place. Only the center is my happy place. Okay, I'm going to apply that on my lower lash line too, the same Frisky shade. And then just to blend that Frisky shade a tiny little bit, I'm going to take this shade which is called Simba from the palette. It's a beautiful, like a coral peachy pink shade, and just blend the outer corners of that shade Frisky, just so that there's some kind of a gradient there. Let's take this shade which is called Loop from the palette. It's a little more on the olive side. I'm gonna take that again where we applied the shade The Best Color, but I'm gonna make it a little more on the other green. Just tapping on top of it so that we don't get that minty green, but go more on this parrot green. Not that I'm comfortable with this, but yeah, let's trust the process as I said in the beginning. Okay, so once we have that all set, I'm gonna take a little bit of NYX glitter glue, just because I have a lot of mattes already laid down. I want something to stick onto it. I'm gonna take a flat brush and take that glitter glue on top of that and basically just apply it all over the lid. Very messily. I'm not going for like any cut crease or anything. I just want a tacky base to stick onto it, but I want those shades to peek through from behind. Okay, so once we have that, let's take Bonehead, because I've not taken that or not played with that shade. So I'm going to start with that Bonehead. Oh my god, how green it is. I'm scared of greens if you guys don't understand. Oh my god. Okay. And basically applying that like towards the half of my eyelid, just like that. I'm going to take a tiny little bit more and just go over the edges so that's not like a cut crease, and just spread it out a tiny little bit. It's a beautiful green. If you are a fan of greens, I mean, you will love it. If I am liking this green, I mean, you'll definitely love it, because I don't love greens. I'm going to take this shade which is called Stunning from the palette, and I'm going to apply that on my inner corners just to tie in with that green, but a little more on the brighter side. I know I've gone with this Stunning shade so many times in the inner corners. That's how I'm comfortable with that shade, using it on my eyes. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to take this shade which is called Portuguese. I actually did a look duping the Cliona Cosmetics palette, the Dragon Fruit palette, and I actually use this palette if you want a little more of like an inspiration look. That look was absolutely stunning. I'll link it in the icons above for you guys to check it out. But I absolutely loved that look. And as you can see, I'm deliberately leaving the center of my eyelid blank because I want something more bright to tie in that green and the purple together. This Portuguese shade, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's so creamy. It's more or less like a Super Shock from Colourful. Super creamy, super dimensional. I love it. Now, I'm gonna take, should I take Manifest or Immaculate or NARS? Let me see. I think that'll be great. Okay, I'm gonna take NARS from the palette because we've not used that. Let's do that. I'm gonna melt it right in the center of my eyelid. It's a beautiful, like a silver, but with a little, tiny little bit of like purpley taupe in it. And when blended together, it's giving a little more on the like a gunmetal blue kind of a shade. Especially when like that green and purple are mixing together. Oh, I love it. Super colorful, super bright. Let me finish off my eyes with some liner and mascara and I'll get right back. I actually have no clue, but I don't know why I'm loving this look. This is totally not me, completely outside my comfort zone, but I'm loving the way how everything turned out. So that is my final look. Let me know in the comment section below which out of the 5 looks did you absolutely love the most. And if you do want like more inspo looks, I leave a few videos in the icons above for you to check it out. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like it, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.